Hello viewers, welcome to Stubborn Silences. In today's episode, we are going to focus on Fyodor Dostoevsky's greatest novels. In this episode, we are really fortunate to have Professor Rajendra Chenni with us. Thank you for coming over here, sir. Thank you for accepting our invitation. I welcome you to our show.
Hello.
Let's jump right into the current. In Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, a bizarrely fascinating work, the character of Malmadov, an ex-bureaucrat, out of ultimate despair, has given himself to alcohol. He sort of evokes our sympathy. This man has ruined his lovely and happy family and is very much aware of his own addiction. But when he makes his petition to Christ, declaring that Christ shall save us, the terrible sinners, we kind of feel for this guy. And of course, we have Raskolnikov, the philosopher murderer with an axe, who suffers from guilt and remorse, which again our unnamed narrator from the underground feels purifies human beings. Finally, the pedophile Svidrigailov appears to me like a sinister double of Raskolnikov. He too goes through constant suffering, though his suffering rushes him towards his impending doom. Now, I am curious to hear your thoughts on these characters or on these contradictory themes of suffering and redemption, or punishment and crime.
No, I think what we need is a framework which can bring in not only a discussion of crime and punishment, but also of other works of Dostoevsky. Because what I feel is that though they are so different in their themes and their the structuring of the narratives, etc., there seem to be a core of themes and a certain way of looking at basic issues of human existence which knit them together. The framework I have in mind in discussing Malmadov and the other characters in Crime and Punishment is Dostoevsky is trying to ultimately find out the justification for human suffering. Because his conception of human existence, especially in modern societies, is that it's a long tail, unending tail of suffering. And one can of course find social, economic and other so-called structural social causes for this suffering. But I think the fiction of Dostoevsky works at a deeper level, where he tries to raise some very metaphysical questions. If we take it for granted that human existence cannot exist, without suffering, then the question is, what's its relevance, what's its meaning? Even without asking questions about who created all this, one could definitely ask this question: does it have any meaning, any relevance, or should we take it as only one inalienable part of an absurd existence of human beings on the earth? I believe Dostoevsky, because of the influence of the Orthodox Russian Church and its basic tenets, and also by his own experiences, came to believe that suffering has a purpose. And the purpose is, first of all, to create a conscience in the human beings. If you look at the structure of this novel, the whole question that is being placed before us as a subtext is, there are some who do not suffer, and they are the ones for whom there is not going to be any salvation. There are others who may be guilty of many things, like Malmadov, and who may appear to be incapable of redemption. But what happens is, through the creation of a conscience, where they at least realize that they have done wrong and they have hurt other human beings, this is the beginning of the journey towards redemption. But then there are other characters like Raskolnikov himself or like Svidrigailov. They are the ones who have created an intellectual shield, with which they protect themselves from hurt and pain. That does not happen so much in the case of Raskolnikov, because soon after the murder he begins to suffer, and also though he refuses to admit his guilt, the psychological suffering definitely takes place in the novel, which you can't say about Svidrigailov and many other characters we find in Dostoevsky.
Yeah, even in the end when Svidrigailov commits suicide and ends his suffering, I don't think he's really regretting or anything. I think he just wants to plant some terrible emotion in the minds of a bystander, because while taking a bullet, Svidrigailov makes sure that there is an innocent witness. I think he's a policeman or something, right? So maybe whatever, he's making sure that there is an innocent witness around, and he looks at this man and declares, I'm going to America. I'm going to America, and blows his brains off. So just imagine what kind of impact this suicide will leave on the mind of a bystander who just witnessed a gruesome death.
I'll go with the critics who say that Svidrigailov, he has a separate ontological status. He is a human being, all right, but one thing that distinguishes him from Raskolnikov and everybody, all other characters that we come across, is the absolute absence of a conscience. You see, there are critics who say, after all, he commits suicide later, and therefore perhaps despite his appearance of being so very nonchalant and indifferent, like a god of indifference, not even showing a small iota of guilt or compassion towards anybody, maybe he chooses to finish himself. As I said, that also is a possible explanation, but what is very unique about the creation of this character, and also of the character we come across in the Demons, you see, what we Stavrogin in that novel is this absence. Raskolnikov at least is making a transition, and therefore he suffers, and he asks questions about the validity of what he believed and he did. Here is Svidrigailov, who sometimes behaves as though he is a machine of evil, kills the women who have a relationship with him, and he is also a pedophile, and he is responsible for deaths happening. So I think probably in Dostoevsky's fiction we have these what should I say, grades of being conscious about what you are doing, from zero conscience in something, some character like Svidrigailov. You have Raskolnikov, you have Ivan, who suffer because they are aware of the complexity of what is happening, whereas Svidrigailov, he seems to have taken it for granted that he has an absolute permission to continue to do what he has been doing, with not even the least imagination of what his actions can lead to. That I think is what Dostoevsky is trying to, and we should take it as a concrete human embodiment of what can happen if you agree with Raskolnikov, if you agree with Ivan.
Even in the end when he commits suicide, I don't think it's guilt or regrets that pushed him towards that extreme measure. He makes sure that there is an innocent bystander. He makes sure that this man is going to watch me, and he says, I'm going to America, and takes a bullet off.
And I think that's a very nasty comment that Dostoevsky made on America, because here is Svidrigailov, not even with a passport, but trying to emigrate to USA. And maybe, in some of the villains, it's a very Shakespearean element in Dostoevsky. They are very theatrical, They need an audience for the evil things they do. One of them is Svidrigailov. You look at the entries he makes in the novel, overhearing the confession of Raskolnikov, etc., etc. So there is a kind of theatricality of evil, Maybe that is also one reason, because he wants to make a very impressive exit, you know. Or maybe if he does have an interiority, we don't know. There's not much evidence of that. If there is a hidden interiority inside Svidrigailov, maybe he realizes he has done all evil that he can, and that's also like an end of the road. How much evil can you perpetrate? You know, that's how.